One night changed everything for Imani, betrayed by the man she trusted, abandoned by a stranger she never meant to meet, and left to face a secret that could redefine her future. How do you rebuild when life shatters in an instant? Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Imani Anderson was the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. Her natural beauty was undeniable, but it wasn't her looks that defined her. She carried herself with grace and a quiet strength that came from her unwavering principles. Raised in a modest home by parents who instilled in her the value of self-respect, Imani believed that intimacy was something sacred, meant to be shared only within the bounds of true love and commitment. But in a world that often sought instant gratification, her steadfastness was misunderstood. Time after time, her relationships ended when her boyfriends couldn't understand or respect her boundaries. They called her naive or old-fashioned, and though the rejection stung, Imani refused to compromise her beliefs. She told herself she was waiting for the right man, the one who would truly cherish and honor her for who she was. Yet, her strength was not without its challenges. Deep down, Imani wondered if her ideals were holding her back. At 26, she had watched her friends find love, get married, and settle down, while she remained single, clinging to her convictions. She often found herself questioning, was I wrong? Was I asking for too much? But just as doubt began to creep in, Imani would remind herself of the countless stories she had heard of women who regretted giving in too soon, only to be abandoned. Her latest relationship with Ryan Carter seemed promising. He was charming, attentive, and persistent. For 2 years, Ryan had stuck by her side, seemingly understanding her boundaries. Imani started to believe he might be different, that he might be the one who truly accepted her for who she was. When their second anniversary came around, Ryan surprised her with a romantic date, saying he had something special planned. Imani's heart fluttered with excitement. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of her happily ever after. But fate had other plans. What Imani didn't realize was that life had a cruel twist in store. The very principles she held dear would soon be tested in ways she never imagined. The night had started innocently enough. Imani had gone out with friends to celebrate a rare moment of carefree joy. She didn't drink often, but that evening, her friends had convinced her to let loose. The dim lights of the bar and the buzz of laughter around her dulled her usual guardedness. For once, Imani wanted to forget her struggles, her doubts, and the constant pressure of being the good girl. But as the drinks flowed, so did the blurring of her judgment. She remembered snippets of the night, dancing with her friends, the room spinning slightly, and the warm feeling of freedom coursing through her. Somewhere along the way, she had bumped into a man. She couldn't recall much about him, only that he was tall, well-dressed, and carried an air of confidence that made him stand out in the crowd. He had smiled at her, and she remembered thinking that his smile was disarming, almost comforting. The rest of the night was a haze. She woke up the next morning in an unfamiliar room, the sunlight streaming through the curtains blinding her groggy eyes. Her head throbbed, and her stomach churned as she tried to piece together the events of the night before. The first thing she noticed was the pristine hotel room, far more luxurious than anything she had ever been in. The second was the empty space beside her in the bed. Panic surged through her as she realized she wasn't alone the night before. Her heart raced as she looked around the room. On the nightstand, she saw a half-empty glass of water and a business card. She picked it up with trembling hands. It bore the name Jaden Vanderbilt, a name she vaguely recognized from the news. He was a prominent businessman, a billionaire whose life was a constant subject of gossip columns. But why had he been here? Why had she been here? Imani's mind swirled with questions she couldn't answer. She felt a pit of guilt in her stomach. The previous night wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal of everything she had stood for. Tears pricked her eyes as she hurriedly dressed and fled the room. She didn't even know if she would ever see him again, or if she wanted to. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Imani's life. She replayed that night over and over in her mind, trying to recall the details, trying to remember what led her to make a choice so unlike herself. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't fill in the blanks. The guilt gnawed at her, and the shame was overwhelming. She couldn't even confide in her friends, afraid they would judge her as harshly as she judged herself. It had been 2 years since Imani started dating Ryan Carter, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future with someone. Ryan was everything she thought she needed: charming, patient, and always ready with a smile that could ease her worries. He was persistent in his pursuit of her, never pushing her boundaries and respecting her decision to wait for intimacy. Over time, Ryan made her feel safe in ways she hadn't felt with anyone else. So when he told her he had planned something special for their 2-year anniversary, Imani's heart fluttered. Maybe this was it, the moment where their relationship would take a step toward something deeper and more meaningful. She spent the entire day preparing for the evening, curling her hair, picking out the perfect dress, and carefully applying makeup. Ryan had hinted that he had a surprise in store, and Imani, ever the romantic at heart, let her imagination run wild. Would he propose? Were they finally going to talk about their future together? When Ryan pulled up to her house in his sleek black car, Imani's excitement was barely contained. He kissed her cheek as she slid into the passenger seat, and they drove into the city. As they turned into the driveway of a high-end hotel, Imani's eyes widened in surprise. "What are we doing here, Ryan?" she asked with a laugh. "I thought we were going to a restaurant." He smiled, his dimples deepening in the way she found so endearing. "Trust me, Imani. I've got something special planned." Her heart soared as he parked the car and escorted her inside. He had clearly made arrangements ahead of time because he retrieved a room key from the front desk with ease. They rode the elevator to the 5th floor, and Imani couldn't help but imagine rose petals on the bed, candles, or maybe even a ring waiting for her. But when they entered the room, her excitement faltered. There was no sign of anything special. The room was ordinary, nice but unremarkable. No flowers, no decorations, no surprises. Just a bed, a nightstand, and a large window overlooking the city. "Why are we here, Ryan?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "What's the surprise?" Ryan locked the door behind him, his expression shifting from playful to serious. He walked toward her, and for the first time that night, Imani felt a flicker of unease. "This is the surprise," he said, stepping closer. "Imani, I love you. And I think it's time we stop pretending we don't want this." She frowned, stepping back as he reached for her. "Ryan, what are you talking about?" He smiled, but it wasn't the warm, kind smile she was used to. This one felt predatory, almost desperate. Before she could react, Ryan grabbed her by the shoulders and pressed her onto the bed. "Ryan, stop!" Imani exclaimed, panic rising in her chest. She struggled against him, turning her head to avoid his kisses. "What's gotten into you?" "Imani, come on. We've been together for 2 years. Don't you think it's time?" he said, his voice low and insistent. "I love you. Why won't you let me show you how much?" "Because I'm not ready," she yelled, shoving him as hard as she could. For a moment he backed off, but the reprieve was short-lived. Ryan tore off his shirt and reached for her again, his determination written all over his face. Imani's heart raced as fear took hold. She scrambled to the edge of the bed, but Ryan grabbed her arm and pinned her down again. "Ryan, please stop," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "You're scaring me." His grip loosened slightly, and for a brief second, he seemed to hesitate. But then he shook his head, his frustration boiling over. "I just don't understand you, Imani. Why are you so difficult? I've waited long enough." With every ounce of strength she had, Imani shoved him off and scrambled to her feet. She grabbed her purse and ran for the door, her hands shaking as she unlocked it and bolted into the hallway. She didn't look back, not even when she heard Ryan calling after her. She took the stairs down to the lobby, her breaths coming in gasps, her chest tight with fear and heartbreak. By the time she made it outside, the cold night air hit her like a slap to the face. She hailed a cab, tears streaming down her cheeks as she gave the driver her address. She couldn't stop shaking, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. Ryan, the man she thought she could trust, had betrayed her in the worst way. The illusion of their love had been shattered, leaving her to question how she could have been so wrong about him. As the cab sped through the city streets, Imani realized that she was utterly alone in her pain. For the second time in as many months, her life had taken a turn she hadn't seen coming. And this time, she wasn't sure if she had the strength to pick up the pieces. Imani couldn't shake the tremors that coursed through her body as she sat on the edge of her bed that night, staring blankly at her hands. Her fingers clutched the edges of her dress, wrinkling the fabric she had so carefully chosen for what she thought would be a magical night. Instead, it had become a nightmare. The betrayal cut deep, Not just because Ryan had tried to force her into something she wasn't ready for, but because he had shattered the fragile trust she had spent years building. She replayed the scene over and over in her head. The look in Ryan's eyes, the way his touch had turned from gentle to aggressive, the way his words that once made her feel cherished, had become weapons used to break her down. She had spent 2 years believing he understood her, respecting her boundaries, and loving her for who she was. But tonight, he had revealed a truth she could no longer ignore. His love was conditional. The next morning, Imani's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Ryan. He apologized profusely, claiming he hadn't meant to scare her. His messages shifted between remorse and frustration, blaming her for overreacting. Imani stared at the screen, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She wanted to believe the man she had loved for 2 years was still in there somewhere, but the image of his face, twisted with anger and impatience, was burned into her memory. When he called, she hesitated before answering. "Imani, I'm so sorry," Ryan began, his voice filled with feigned sincerity. "I was just caught up in the moment. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't just hurt me, Ryan," Imani said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You broke my trust. How could you do that to me? After everything we've been through." "Because I love you," he shouted, his tone shifting to irritation. "I don't understand why you're so difficult. Do you even love me? Or are you just stringing me along?" Imani's grip tightened on the phone. "Don't you dare try to blame this on me. You knew who I was from the beginning. I've never hidden my boundaries from you. If that wasn't enough for you, you should have walked away. I stayed because I thought you'd change," he snapped. "I've been patient, Imani. I've waited for you longer than any guy would. But maybe I was wasting my time." Imani's heart sank. There it was, the ugly truth. He had never truly accepted her for who she was. His love had always been a negotiation, a transaction he expected to end in his favor. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wasn't going to let him see her break. "You didn't love me, Ryan," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "You loved the idea of what I could give you. But I'm done. Don't call me again." She hung up before he could respond and immediately blocked his number. For a moment, she sat in silence, her chest heaving as she tried to process what had just happened. It was over. 2 years of her life had ended in a single phone call. And though she knew she had made the right decision, the pain of his betrayal was almost unbearable. In the weeks that followed, Imani threw herself into her work, trying to keep her mind off the heartbreak. But no matter how busy she kept herself, the pain lingered. Ryan's words echoed in her mind, feeding her insecurities. Was I asking for too much? Was I wrong to hold on to my beliefs? Would I ever find someone who truly loved me for who I was? The questions haunted her, threatening to erode the confidence she had spent years building. But as the days turned into weeks, something inside her began to shift. The anger she felt toward Ryan transformed into a quiet determination. She realized that his betrayal wasn't a reflection of her worth, but of his inability to see it. One evening, as she sat on her couch with a cup of tea, Imani found herself thinking back to the values her mother had instilled in her. "Don't ever let someone make you feel small because of what you believe in," her mother had said. "The right person will see your strength, not try to break it." Those words became a mantra for Imani. She refused to let Ryan's actions define her or her future. If anything, the experience had shown her that she deserved more respect, more kindness, and more love than Ryan had ever been capable of giving. And while she wasn't sure what the future held, she was certain of one thing. She wouldn't settle for anything less. As Imani began to rebuild her life, she focused on self-care and finding joy in the little things. She joined a local community group to meet new people, started journaling to process her emotions, and even took up yoga as a way to reconnect with herself. Slowly but surely, she began to feel like herself again. But life wasn't done testing her just yet. Unbeknownst to Imani, a twist of fate was waiting just around the corner, one that would change the course of her life forever. The seed of a new challenge, and perhaps a new purpose, had already been planted. All it needed was time to grow. Imani's life began to settle into a cautious normalcy in the weeks following her painful breakup with Ryan. She threw herself into her routine, focusing on her work and rediscovering the small joys of independence. Though her heart still carried the scars of betrayal, she was determined not to let the experience define her. She spent more time journaling, meditating, and revisiting the dreams she had placed on hold during her relationship. But just as she began to feel stable again, a new and unexpected challenge emerged. It started with a subtle unease, an occasional wave of nausea, a sudden fatigue that she couldn't explain. At first, Imani brushed it off as stress catching up with her. After all, the past few months had been emotionally grueling. She chalked it up to exhaustion from pushing herself too hard. But when the symptoms persisted and her period was late, a gnawing fear crept into her mind. She tried to push it aside, convincing herself it was just her body reacting to stress. Yet, deep down, she knew something was different. Finally, one Saturday morning, unable to ignore her instincts any longer, Imani went to the pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test. Standing in her bathroom, she stared at the box in her trembling hands, her heart pounding. She hesitated for a moment, afraid of what the test might reveal. But she couldn't avoid the truth any longer. Minutes later, 2 pink lines appeared on the test. Imani sank to the floor, the air knocked out of her lungs. The confirmation hit her like a tidal wave. She was pregnant. At first, Imani's mind was a storm of confusion and disbelief. She felt an overwhelming mix of emotions, fear, sadness, and anger tangled with a faint glimmer of something she couldn't quite name. Her hands rested on her stomach as she tried to process the reality of the situation. Her thoughts immediately turned to the night she had tried so hard to forget, the blurred memory of a stranger in a hotel room, a man whose name she barely knew. Jaden Vanderbilt. The business card flashed in her mind like a neon sign. The pregnancy was undoubtedly from that night. Shame washed over her as she thought about how far she had strayed from the principles she had held onto for so long. How could she have let this happen? How could she have allowed herself to be so vulnerable? But as the initial wave of regret began to subside, a new thought took its place. What now? The question loomed over her like a dark cloud. Imani was faced with decisions she never thought she'd have to make. She could try to find Jaden, but what would she say? What kind of man would he turn out to be? And did she even want him involved in her life or her child's? As Imani sat in her room, surrounded by silence, a small voice inside her began to grow louder. It was the same voice that had carried her through every heartbreak, every disappointment, and every challenge she had faced. "You are stronger than this," it whispered. Slowly, Imani began to feel the weight of her emotions shift. She thought about the tiny life growing inside her, a life that didn't ask to be created, a life that now depended on her. For the first time, her fear and regret began to transform into something new: resolve. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She would not let this define her as a failure. She would not let shame or fear rob her of the strength she had spent her entire life cultivating. "This is my child," she whispered to herself, her hand resting gently on her stomach. "And I'm going to give them the best life I can." Over the next few days, Imani began to take small but deliberate steps toward her new reality. She made an appointment with a doctor to confirm the pregnancy and discuss her options. She started reading books about pregnancy and parenting, hoping to prepare herself for the road ahead. And most importantly, she began to envision a future where she could embrace this unexpected twist in her life. But even as she planned, questions lingered in the back of her mind. Should she reach out to Jaden? Would he even care? She pulled out the business card she had saved and stared at the name printed in bold letters. Jaden Vanderbilt was a powerful man, a billionaire whose life was worlds apart from her own. Reaching out to him felt like stepping into an unfamiliar and intimidating territory. But she couldn't shake the feeling that he deserved to know. Imani decided to give herself time to think. For now, she focused on herself and her baby. She would take things one day at a time, trusting that the answers would come when she was ready. The pregnancy, though unplanned, had become a turning point for Imani. It forced her to confront her fears and rediscover her inner strength. She began to see the experience not as a mistake, but as an opportunity to grow. For years, Imani had lived by her principles, believing that life's challenges could be overcome with courage and resilience. Now, she was being tested in ways she had never imagined. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. She would face it with the same unyielding heart that had carried her through everything else. Months after her life was upended, Imani finds herself balancing the weight of single motherhood with the determination to forge a path forward. Working long hours at a small publishing firm, she has little time for anything beyond survival. One day, while attending a high-profile charity gala hosted by her employer, her world takes an unexpected turn. Among the crowd of glittering elites stands Jaden Vanderbilt, a man whose mere presence commands attention. Jaden is a powerful, enigmatic business mogul, renowned for his wealth and philanthropy. At first glance, Imani feels no connection to him, only awe at his imposing aura. However, as she watches him speak, snippets of his mannerisms, voice, and even his rare smile stir something deep in her memory. During the gala, Jaden unexpectedly approaches Imani, drawn by her grace and striking beauty. Their initial conversation is formal, but filled with a strange undercurrent of familiarity. Jaden's curiosity is piqued when he realizes Imani's voice and demeanor remind him of someone he cannot quite place. Later that evening, while cleaning up after the event, Imani accidentally overhears a private conversation between Jaden and a colleague. Jaden mentions a regretful encounter from his past, a night clouded by alcohol and impulsive decisions. The details of his story align disturbingly well with the night Imani conceived her child. The revelation shakes Imani to her core. Could Jaden Vanderbilt, this man of power and influence, be the stranger who altered the course of her life? Torn between anger and desperation, Imani decides to confront him. But how does one approach a man so untouchable and unravel secrets that could dismantle his carefully crafted world? Driven by the need for answers, Imani digs deeper into Jaden's life, uncovering more about his past and the forces that shaped him. She discovers a man not only burdened by guilt, but also yearning for something he cannot name. Their paths are destined to intertwine, but whether their meeting will lead to reconciliation or further heartbreak remains uncertain. This chapter marks the beginning of a complex, emotionally charged connection between Imani and Jaden, setting the stage for the truth to come to light and their lives to change forever. Imani's suspicions about Jaden Vanderbilt weigh heavily on her, and after days of contemplation, she decides it is time to confront him. Armed with courage and the burning need for clarity, she arranges to meet him under the pretense of a professional discussion. The setting is Jaden's sprawling estate, a world far removed from the simplicity of Imani's life. As they sit across from each other in his grand study, Imani hesitantly begins to piece together her story, choosing her words carefully. Jaden listens intently, his sharp gaze never leaving her face. At first, his expression is unreadable, but as Imani delves deeper into the details of the night that changed her life, the realization dawns on him. The room is silent as Jaden processes her words. He admits that he remembers the night she is describing, a charity event followed by a reckless evening of indulgence. His voice carries a mix of remorse and disbelief as he recounts his fragmented memories of the encounter. Jaden confesses that he had no idea what became of the woman he spent the night with, and Imani's revelation leaves him shaken. Imani struggles with her emotions, anger, hurt, and the desire for justice clash with the recognition of Jaden's genuine remorse. She reveals that she has a child, the result of their fleeting union, and her voice trembles as she describes the challenges she has faced raising the baby alone. Jaden's reaction is immediate. Shock gives way to a fierce determination to take responsibility for his actions. The confrontation forces both of them to confront painful truths. For Imani, it is an opportunity to reclaim her power and demand accountability. For Jaden, it is a moment of reckoning that compels him to examine the choices that have defined his life. However, their path forward is anything but simple. Jaden's wealth and influence make him a target for scandal, and the revelation of an illegitimate child threatens to destroy his reputation. Meanwhile, Imani must navigate her own doubts about allowing Jaden into her child's life and reconciling her feelings about his role in her past. As they work through their tangled emotions, they find themselves drawn together by a shared commitment to do what is best for the child. Their interactions reveal unexpected depths to their personalities. Jaden, once aloof and guarded, shows a capacity for vulnerability and tenderness, while Imani's strength and resilience earn Jaden's deep respect. Their evolving relationship is further complicated by external forces. Jaden's world is filled with people who have their own agendas, and the news of his connection to Imani and the child threatens to attract unwanted attention. Together, they must navigate these challenges, forging an uneasy alliance that is tested at every turn. By the end of the chapter, Imani and Jaden stand at a crossroads. The truth has been unveiled, but the decisions they face will shape not only their lives but the future of their child. As they grapple with questions of trust, forgiveness, and responsibility, the stage is set for a journey of redemption and renewal. With the truth fully unveiled, Imani and Jaden embark on a challenging journey to rebuild their lives, now irrevocably intertwined. The road ahead is fraught with emotional struggles, societal pressures, and the daunting task of creating a stable future for their child. However, it is also a path of healing, self-discovery, and transformation. Jaden takes immediate steps to acknowledge his responsibility, both privately and publicly. In a press conference filled with media frenzy, he admits to his past mistakes and expresses his commitment to being a father. This decision earns him both admiration for his honesty and backlash from those who view his actions as tarnishing his pristine image. Meanwhile, Imani grapples with her newfound visibility. As her connection to Jaden becomes public, she faces scrutiny and judgment from the media and society. Despite the challenges, Imani refuses to let external opinions define her. She becomes a symbol of resilience, advocating for women who face similar struggles. In their personal lives, Imani and Jaden begin the delicate process of co-parenting. Their interactions are initially formal and cautious, but as they spend more time together, they develop a deeper understanding of each other. Jaden is moved by Imani's unwavering dedication to their child and her refusal to compromise her values. In turn, Imani sees a side of Jaden that few others do: his vulnerability, sincerity, and determination to make amends. Their relationship evolves from one of obligation to genuine partnership. Jaden becomes actively involved in their child's life, cherishing every moment of parenthood and striving to earn Imani's trust. The shared responsibility draws them closer, and a sense of mutual respect begins to flourish. Inspired by their personal journey, Imani and Jaden decide to create a foundation dedicated to supporting single mothers and children in need. The initiative becomes a way for them to channel their experiences into something meaningful. Imani takes a leading role in shaping the foundation's programs, while Jaden leverages his influence and resources to ensure its success. Through their work, they find a renewed sense of purpose. The foundation becomes a beacon of hope for countless families, demonstrating the power of redemption and the importance of compassion and community. As the foundation grows, so does the bond between Imani and Jaden. Their shared commitment to their child and their work leads to moments of quiet intimacy and vulnerability. They begin to see each other not as reminders of past mistakes, but as partners who have overcome immense challenges together. Over time, their relationship blossoms into something more profound. Love, once an improbable notion, takes root in their hearts. Their journey from betrayal to forgiveness, from strangers to family, becomes a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the final moments of the chapter, Imani, Jaden, and their child stand together at the opening ceremony of a new community center built by their foundation. Surrounded by families whose lives they have touched, they share a moment of quiet pride and gratitude. Imani realizes that while her life took an unexpected turn, it has brought her to a place of fulfillment and joy. As they look toward the future, Imani and Jaden embrace the promise of a new beginning. Together, they prove that even in the face of heartbreak and adversity, redemption and renewal are always possible. Their story becomes one of hope, demonstrating that from the ashes of the past, a brighter future can rise. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. Turn on your notification for my next video.